Hello, those of you who are here already. We'll get started in a couple minutes. We still have 5 minutes till 8 o'clock. Chris, yeah, you looks like you are among the first this time. And Risa. That's better. I definitely look more centered this time. Okay. Hello, everybody who's joined. We'll get started in a couple minutes. Just currently setting up, making sure everything is working. If you're in the chat, feel free to say hello. Dhammapalooza is a community event, so the community should be able to commune, come together, get to know each other, say hello, all these things. I tried to get a community of monastics on today, but it just didn't work out. So it's just me you're stuck with. Let's see what time it is. Oh, just about 8. Hello, John, and all the Muggasekas. all the students of the path. What path? The Noble Eightfold Path, of course. All right. So I think we can get started. It is 8:01. We have a good amount of people here. Chris is here for the first time in the beginning and not the last 10 minutes. He's made it. So we all can say hello to Chris. Oh, Jason? Okay. So let's get started. We'll start, as always, with our chanting. Well, that is one way to experience Dhammapalooza, Chris. Sauna-palooza. Okay. My tablet is malfunctioning, so I guess I'll have to lean over. Oh, wait. So we're going to chant Bhara Sutta, which is page 105. It's only one page. Savatyang tatra ko bharanchavo bhikkhave desas. Oh, actually, should start with Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So we're going to do a short chant this time, not a big one. This is one of my favorites in all of the suttas. Bhara Sutta. Savatyang tatra ko bharanchavo bhikkhave desse sami bharanachanad bharadhana cha bharanikka pancha tang sunata katamo cha bhikkhave bharo panchupadana kanda tissa vachaniyang katame pancha rupupadangataro vedanapadanakando sanyapadanakando sankara rupadanakando vinyarupakando ayang vucchati bhikkhave bharo katamo cha bhikkhave bhara bharo Puggalo tissa vachaniyang vyayang ayasma evam namo evangato evang ayang vucchati bhikkhave bharaharo katamancha bhikkhave bharadhanang yayang tanha pono bhavika nandiragasatthagata Tatra tata bindana dini seyatidang katamanta bhavantaha Vibhavatanha idang vuchati bhikkave bharadanang katamancha bhikkave bharanikkapanang yotaseva tanhaya asesa viraga nirodo chago patinisaggo mutti analiyo idang vuchati bhikkave bharanakkipandanti idamavocha bhagava idang vatvana sugato attaparang etadavocha satta bhara have panchakaganda bhara harocha puggalo bhara dhandang dukkang loke bhara nikke panang sukkang nikkipitva garung bharang anyang bharang anadaya samulang tanha mabuya nichato parinibbutoti. All right. English. At Savatthi, the Blessed One said this: Bhikkhus, I will teach you of the burden, the carrier of the burden, the taking up of the burden, and the laying down of the burden. Listen to that. Those of you who've heard me talk enough, you've heard this before. And if you've heard my guided meditations, you know I talk about laying down the burden, right? When I say when I do a guided meditation, it's not made up. It goes directly from the suttas. Laying down the burden. Listen to that. And what, bhikkhus, is the burden? It should be said, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. And we know what the Buddha says, right? The definition of dukkha, all kinds of stuff, old age, sickness, birth, death, not getting what you want, not being. In short, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. Right? So keep that in mind as we listen to this. What 5? The form aggregate subject to clinging, the feeling aggregate subject to clinging, the perception aggregate subject to clinging, the volitional formations aggregate subject to clinging, and the consciousness aggregate subject to clinging. This is called the burden. Important to understand, not the 5 aggregates themselves, right? Not form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Not the 5 aggregates in and of themselves. It is our grasping to them, our clinging to them. That is the burden. And what, bhikkhus, is the carrier of the burden? It should be said, the person. This venerable one of such a name and clan. This is called the carrier of the burden. Right? As long as we have identity view, as long as we believe this is me, this is mine, this is myself. I like this, I dislike that. I believe in this, I don't believe in that. We are that person, that character that carries the burden. And what, bhikkhus, is the taking up of the burden? It is this craving that leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination. This is called the taking up of the burden. Excuse me. So the Buddha talks about 3 types of tanha, 3 types of craving, thirst. Kama tanha, that's the craving for sensual pleasures. Bhava tanha, craving for continued existence. Vibhava tanha, craving for no more existence. So that's what this is here. And what is the laying down of the burden? It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. This is called laying down of the burden. Letting go, laying the burden, freedom, lightness, peace, like being on a long journey with a heavy backpack. many, many hours, 9, 10 hours with this heavy backpack weighing you down. And you get so used to it, you don't even notice how heavy it is anymore. But when you lay that backpack down, all of a sudden you feel like you can fly away. You feel so light, right? That is the joy of laying down the burden. And then you don't even want to lift it back up. But only the Arahant has laid down the burden permanently, right? The rest of us lay it down for a little bit, but then we pick it back up again because of our own ignorance. That's just the way it is. So then this is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said this. So now we have a set of verses. The 5 aggregates are truly burdens. The burden carrier is the person. Taking up the burden is suffering in the world. Laying the burden down is blissful. Having laid this heavy burden down, without taking up another burden, having drawn out craving with its root, one is freed from hunger, fully quenched. Just listening to these words rises my desire for awakening, to fully lay down the burden forever. Right? This is such a wonderful, wonderful, it's only one page, but it jam-packed with deep Dhamma. I love this Bhara Sutta, the burden. Okay. So friends, welcome to Dhammapalooza. If you've never been to Dhammapalooza before, let me take a drink first. So I'm not hacking up a lung in everybody's ears for the next 2 hours. Dhammapalooza is a festival of Dhamma. It's a time and a place for the community to come together and to share Dhamma, to listen to Dhamma, to participate in discussion about Dhamma. This is not about me sitting here yapping on for 2 hours. This is about the community coming together, right? And this is why if you don't have a YouTube account, or if you have a YouTube account, to log in and join the community in the chat. Right now, Chris is dominating it. Everybody else is being quiet. But this is an encouragement that you can discuss, make comments in the chat, talk in the chat. Even if I'm typing in the chat is not a distraction, right? It's perfectly fine to type in the chat, right? If you have a comment or a question, and as I go along, I'll check the chat and I will, I will respond. So I have a sutta that we can go through. I have some prepared things, but as always, I like to open it up to the community first. So if you have any topics you'd like to discuss, or topics you'd like me to talk about, if you have any questions that you'd like answered, we can do that. Right? I like to have a free form flowing Dhammapalooza. So each time it's different, right? We never know how it's going to end up. We know there's chanting. We know there might be sutta reading. We know there's some guided meditation. But other than that, we don't know how or when or why, right? So this is, I'll give a little time here to see if anybody who's in the chat would actually like to discuss anything. Well, interestingly enough, Chris is literally the only one that can chat, I guess. It shows at least 8 people, but I guess 7 people are not in the chat. Maybe they don't have a YouTube video, a YouTube account. I don't know. So right now, it is only Chris in the chat. So I'm not going to expect anything. Let's see. Yes, Chris, thank you. Please hit the thumbs up for the streaming. That helps the channel. Yeah, these kind of things, any kind of Buddhist channels on YouTube that you frequent, please, subscribe, click the bell, click like and all that stuff, because that actually helps these channels be more well known and more in the YouTube algorithm and all that stuff. So that's appreciated. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, because now Reese is back here. All right. Yeah, I don't think that these numbers actually are accurate. They don't seem to actually match who's here and what's going on and all that stuff. So, Chris, voluntary carries a big backpack in the wilderness. Can confirm the joy of putting it down. Yes, I was one of those people too. Yes, I know. When I talk about carrying a heavy backpack for lots of hours, I know exactly what it feels like to put it down. That's why I love using that simile, right? Because you can understand that, and it really does. It really does work. Like when you have moments in your practice where you have really let it all down, right? Where there's just peace, tranquility, equanimity in your mind, right? No suffering temporarily. You're like, ooh, this is really nice. I like this. How do I do this more? Right? This might happen like randomly during a meditation, right? And then it goes away. And then like the next 5 meditations, you're like, how do I get back to this? I need to get back to this. And you cause yourself suffering trying to get back to it, right? But the trick is to let it go. As soon as you start to suffer, as soon as you start to try to control, as soon as you start to crave something, that's where suffering lies, right? The remainderless fading away of this very craving. That's letting go of the burden. Chris would like to discuss the phrase Kalyanamitta. See, Chris, this is what happens when you're not taking that, when you're not checking out my channel and things. I just did like 2 talks in the last couple of weeks about Kalyanamitta. But it's always good to talk about Kalyanamitta because we don't know who's listening with us. So that's a good thing. All right. Okay, now people are chiming in. As soon as I'm going to start the sutta, right? As soon as I was like, okay, I'm going to start the sutta that I picked out, now people are chiming in. Such is the way. So we go with the flow. So Kalyanamitta. Kalyana means good, virtuous. Right? Somebody who is living a virtuous, moral, good life. Mitta means friend. Right? So in modern parlance, like in these kind of the spiritual community, like the Buddhist spiritual community, like Kalyanamitta are spiritual friends, right? But this isn't actually what the word means. This means somebody who is a virtuous, wise, skillful person. This doesn't even have to be a Buddhist person, right? A Kalyanamitta is somebody who is acting skillfully and encourages you to act skillfully. That's a Kalyanamitta. Like I tell the story of my best friend from lay life, Rafe, right? Who was, my best friend during my progression into Buddhism, right? He's not a Buddhist, but he encouraged me in my practice, and we encouraged each other to live skillfully, to do good things, right? To live with meaning in the world. Right? And so he was a huge Kalyanamitta for me for many years, right? Up until I left and I went to the monastery, right? And although we don't really talk much these days, he's still a Kalyanamitta to me because he still supports what I'm doing, right? And I support what he's doing. And that's how it is. So it means good, skillful, moral, virtuous friend. That's what this means. Right? So the Buddha tells us, right, to avoid the fool. Anybody who's foolish, people who are acting very badly, unskillfully, living an immoral life, hedonistic life, right? Buddha says there's no companionship with the bala. There's no companionship with fool. So avoid the fools at all costs. Buddha says, if you cannot find a kalyanamitta, a virtuous friend, then it's better to wander alone like an elephant in the woods. Right? Because at the very least, if you don't have the power and the joy and the friendship of a virtuous friend, at the very least, you're not enjoined with an unskillful, foolish person who's going to drag you down. Right? So the Buddha says, better to wander alone, like a king that's left his kingdom, like an elephant in the woods. But then the Buddha says also, if you do have a virtuous friend, then hold on to them and do whatever you can to not be separated from them. This is one of the few times in the suttas where the Buddha actually kind of encourages your craving, right? There's a few times, but usually it's towards something that's skillful, right? So it's if you're going to crave towards something, crave towards having good, skillful friends, right? Instead of wanting to have lots of friends, have a few good, skillful friends. Be part of a friend group of people who, they don't have to all be Buddhist. They could be different religions. They could be no religions. But if they're all encouraging skillful, moral living, then that's a kalyanamitta. Those are being people that you should be around. And you should be by their side and hold on to them as much as you can. Hello, Reed. So that's what I have to say about kalyanamitta. Sierra says, could you expand on the concept of craving for non-existence? This is an interesting one, right? So what I would say is there's a skillful way and there's an unskillful way of thinking about this, right? Because the unskillful way is, I can't stand living. I just want to kill myself, right? I don't want to live I don't want to exist anymore. And I hope nobody else exists anymore, right? That's very unskillful, right? Because it doesn't really lead you to anywhere skillful. It doesn't help you. You're just reborn again and you're just stuck in the same thing, right? Then there's the skillful way of desiring non-existence. There's the, I wish to end this samsara journey. I wish to end my rebirth in samsara, end my suffering, and to not be born again. Right? This is a very skillful aspiration. It's a very skillful wish, a very skillful thing to desire, right? If done in the right way. I'm done with samsara. I want to work hard to abandon it, to let it go, to become awakened, right? So there's two ways that, Brian, craving enlightenment versus craving nihilism. Yeah, it's not a bad way of putting it. It's basically a short version of what I just said, which is something good because I'm not good at being succinct. I try to be succinct, but I'm not the best at it. So yeah, this is one of the interesting things. Like, there's really the only escape, the only refuge from existence is awakening, right? And there is also something else to consider, because the Buddha has asked, is an awakened being, do they exist or do they not exist after death? Or do they not exist and exist after death? Or do they neither exist nor not exist after death? And the Buddha refused to answer these things, right? It says these are invalid questions. He refused to answer these questions. Right? Why? Because it's beyond conventions. It's beyond the concepts, nibbana, awakening is the unraveling of all concepts and conventions, right? You go beyond these things. So there's no way to describe somebody who has been fully extinguished in these ways, right? So even in that way, we should understand that this is not necessarily a craving to not exist anymore. It's a craving to end the cycle of samsara, the craving to end your suffering. Because if we're craving to not exist, it can go that negative way that is just going to keep us in samsara, in our suffering. Brian says, craving for enlightenment is a form of craving. Yes. The Buddha fully acknowledges, and the suttas, the early texts fully acknowledge that there is such a thing as skillful craving, skillful desire. Right? In one of the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Ananda is asked, is there such a thing as skillful craving? And he says, yes. The craving to end all craving, right? So if we're going to have this craving, at least let's try to hijack our craving towards skillful things, like a craving to follow the Noble Eightfold Path, craving to meditate, craving to practice skillful morality, practice dana, these kind of things. So hijack our craving, train our craving towards activities that will lead to the ending of our craving. Because the Buddha says, even when somebody becomes awakened, they even have to let go of this very Dhamma. Like the Buddha uses the simile of, to cross the stream, you use a raft. The raft is Dhamma. But when you go to the other side of the stream, when you become awakened, you don't like special forces do. Sometimes you see like they put the rafts on their heads or whatever, and they walk it through the jungle. You don't do that right, with the raft of Dhamma. You leave the raft of Dhamma at the shore. And you continue on, right? Once you have used the Dhamma, you've become awakened, you don't need it anymore. You let it go. You leave it on the shore, right? So even the very Dhamma you let go of once you don't need it anymore. All right, so I'm going to just give it a little bit to see if anybody puts anything in the chat. Otherwise, we can get started with our sutta. And that should bring us just about to the time that we would do our guided meditation. Actually, this worked out perfect because the sutta that I was going to have us discuss is called The Foolish and the Astute. So, Chris, you alley-ooped this very good by asking about Kalyana Mittas. That worked out pretty good. If you want to follow along, this is the link. Majjhima Nikaya, number 129. There's some very famous similes in this one. It's a very good sutta. And also, I don't know, is Adriana here? Adriana's not here, is she? Because there's some fun. We have our patented Discord, Student of the Path Discord punishments that are highlighted in this one as well. All right. But she won't be here to see it. The Foolish and the Astute. All right. Reed's here. Reed knows what it is. Okay, so let's get started then, shall we? the foolish and the astute. So I have heard. At one time the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. And of course, so we're using Sutta Central. This is going to be Bhante Sujato's translation. The Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Buddha said this. There are three characteristics, signs, and manifestations of the fool. What three? A fool thinks poorly, speaks poorly, and acts poorly. If a fool didn't think poorly, speak poorly, and act poorly, then how would the astute know of them? This fellow is a fool, a bad person. But since a fool does think poorly, speak poorly, and act poorly, the astute do know them. This fellow is a fool, a bad person. A fool experiences three kinds of suffering and sadness in this present life. Suppose a fool is sitting in a council hall, a street, or a crossroad where people are discussing what is proper and fitting. And suppose that fool is someone who kills living creatures, steals, commits sexual misconduct, lies, and uses alcoholic drink that cause negligence. So the 5 precepts. So they don't take the 5 precepts. They actively do. They actively go against the 5 precepts. Then that fool thinks, these people are discussing what is proper and fitting. But those things are found in me, and I am seen in them. This is the first kind of suffering and sadness that a fool experiences in the present life. Let me clarify this here for a second. So people are discussing what is proper and fitting. Oh, okay. So he hears people talking about skillfulness, and he says, "I'm skillful. I'm beneficial. not a fool, right?" So this is a person who doesn't understand that his actions are unskillful. Furthermore, a fool sees that kings have arrested a bandit, a criminal, and subjected them to various punishments: whipping, caning, and clubbing, cutting off hands and feet, or both, cutting off ears or nose, or both, the porridge pot, the shell shave, the demon's mouth, the garland of fire, the burning hand, the grass blades, the bark dress, the antelope, the meat hook, the coins. Adriana's preferred punishment, the acid pickle, right? The twisting bar, the straw mat, being splashed with hot oil, being fed to the dogs, being impaled alive, and being beheaded. Then that fool thinks, the kind of deeds for which the king inflicts on such punishments, those things are found in me, and I am seen in them. If the king finds out about me, they will inflict the same kind of punishments on me. This is the second kind of suffering and sadness a fool experiences in the present life. So, when you practice skillfully, when you have lots of metta and you practice by good virtues principles, Buddha tells us that you give a gift to the world. You're dear to people, right? So you don't have to worry about, what the kings do to criminals, right? But this fool does, because he might do an action that will lead him to suffering in this way. Furthermore, when a fool is resting on a chair or a bed or on the ground, their past bad deeds, misconduct of body, speech, and mind settle down upon them, rest down upon them, and lay down upon them. It is like the shadow of a great mountain peak in the evening as it settles down, rests down, and lays down upon the earth. In the same way, when a fool is resting on a chair, a bed, or on the ground, their past deeds, misconduct of body, speech, and mind settle down upon them, rest down upon them, and lay down upon them. Then the fool thinks, well, I haven't done good and skillful things that keep me safe, and I have done bad, violent, and corrupt things. When I depart, I'll go to a place where people who've done bad such things go. They sorrow and pine and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. This is the third kind of suffering and sadness that a fool experiences in this present life. So again, this is where the Buddha talks about one of the hindrances, restlessness and remorse. This is one of the main reasons why the Buddha's gradual practice doesn't start with sitting down to meditate. It starts with practicing generosity. It starts with living by virtuous principles. It starts with sense restraint. Why? Because if you live by these activities, if you act in such a way, then you will do deeds that will not cause lots of restlessness and worry. You won't worry about who's going to get back at you, right? Or that you're going to get caught and you're going to have punishments. You won't worry about these things, right? So somebody has, when they sit down to meditate, all of these things will come, right? Anytime they sit down, like this is when they sit down on a bed or the ground. So anytime that you're going to have a quiet moment, your mind is going to upbraid you. Your mind is going to start thinking about these things, and worries are going to arise, right? So there's no peace for this person there. And then they think, well, if there's an afterlife, man, I'm screwed, right? What do you see in the movies? Like when bad dudes are like fighting each other or whatever, and one takes out the other, see you in hell, right? Or I'll see you first, right? Like that's like that thought of, well, yeah, I'm pretty much going to not end up in the good place. I'm pretty much going to go to the bad places, after this life. All right. So having done bad things by way of body, speech, and mind, when their body breaks up after death, they were born in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. And if there's anything of which it might be rightly said that is utterly unlikable, undesirable, and disagreeable, it is of hell that this should be said. So much so that it's not easy to give a simile for how painful hell is. When he said this, one of the mendicants asked the Buddha, "But sir, is it possible to give a simile?" "It's possible," the Buddha said. "Suppose they arrest a bandit, a criminal, and present him to the king, saying, 'Your Majesty, this bandit, a criminal, punish him as you will.' The king would say, 'Go, my men, and strike this man in the morning with 100 spears.' The king men did that as they were told. Then at midday, the king would say, 'My men, how is that man? He's still alive, Your Majesty.' The king would say, 'Go, my men, and strike that man in the midday with 100 spears.'" I don't know how a person survives 100 strikes from spears, but this is such a way, right? So the king's men did as they were told. Then late in the afternoon, the king would say, "My men, how is this man? He's still alive, Your Majesty." The king would say, "Go, my men, and strike this man in the afternoon with 100 spears." The king's men did as they were told. What do you think, mendicants? Would that man experience pain and distress from being struck with 300 spears? Sir, that man would experience pain and distress from being struck with 1 spear, let alone 300 spears. Then the Buddha, picking up a stone the size of his palm, addressed the mendicants. What do you think, mendicants? Which is bigger, the stone the size of my palm that I've picked up, or the Himalayas, the king of mountains? Sir, the stone you've picked up is tiny compared to the Himalayas. It doesn't even count. It's not even a fraction. There's no comparison. In the same way, compared to the suffering in hell, the pain and distress experienced by the man due to being struck by 300 spears doesn't even count. It's not even a fraction. There's no comparison. Then the wardens of hell punish them with the 5-fold crucifixion. They drive red-hot stakes through the hands and feet, and another in the middle of the chest. And there they feel painful, sharp, severe, acute feelings. But they don't die until the bad deed is eliminated. Then the wardens of hell throw them down and hack them with axes. This is all. The first time I read something like this, I thought, man, I left Christianity, I thought I left all these things in hell, and here I am reading the suttas, and I see these interesting things. Well, it just goes to show you this is 500 years before, right? Now, of course, it's not before ancient Judaism, but I don't believe there's actually this kind of hell as we understand it in the ancient Judaic tradition. This is something that came later, right? So there's all kinds of ways that the wardens of hell can have fun with you in the Buddha's suttas. They harness them to a chariot. Oh yeah, read. If you remember, this was the one that I picked as my personal punishment for the people who do bad on the Discord. They harness them to a chariot and drive them back and forth across burning ground, blazing and glowing. They make them climb up and do huge mountains of burning coal, up and down a huge mountain of burning coals, blazing and glowing. So the wardens of hell turn them upside down and throw them into a red-hot copper pot, burning, blazing, and glowing. There they are seared in boiling scum, and they are swept up and down and round around. And there they feel painful, sharp, severe, acute feelings, but they don't die until the bad deed is eliminated. Then the wardens of hell toss them into the great hell. Now about that great hell. 4 are its corners, 4 its doors, divided into measured parts, surrounded by an iron wall. Of iron is its roof. The ground is even, made of iron. It burns with fierce fire. The heat forever radiates 100 leagues around. I could tell you many different things about hell. So much so that it's not easy to completely describe the suffering in hell. Yes. So this is, so people understand, if you're not on the Discord Sangha with us, because we're a very sutta-based, early Buddhist text-based thing, we also like to have fun. We like to joke. We make memes and things like that. But it's all based in the suttas. So one day, the mods and the admins, and we joked, and I said, okay, everybody, each one of us gets to choose one way of torture as the way that we can torture the people who are bad on the Discord. Right? So I think Reed chose the volcano, throwing people in the volcano. I don't think that's in the suttas, but it's still a classic one. Right. And Adriana chose the acid pickle. Right? And it's just as a funny joke kind of a thing. It's not, we're not really sending people who, in the Discord to hell. So that's what it is. Risa gives like what is this? Well, see, that's why we have fun. We have fun on the Discord. Yes, well, that escalated quickly. Exactly. Okay, so there are mendicants. So much of this. There are mendicants, animals that feed on grass. They eat by cropping fresh or dried grass with their teeth. And when animals feed on grass, elephants, horse, cattle, donkeys, goats, deer, and various others. A fool who used to be a glutton here and did bad deeds here, when their body breaks up after death, is reborn in the company of those sentient beings who feed on grass. There are animals that feed on dung. When they catch a whiff of dung, they run to it, thinking, there we'll eat, there we'll eat. It's like when the Brahmins smell a burnt offering. They run to it, thinking, there we'll eat, there we'll eat. In the same way, boy, he really ditched the Brahmins on that one, didn't he? Oh, Brian, what was the retracted message? Oh, anyway. So the Buddha giving another ditch to the Brahmins. And what animals feed on dung? Chickens, pigs, dogs, jackals, and various others. A fool who used to be a glutton here and did bad deeds there after death is reborn in the company of those sentient beings who feed on dung. There are animals who are born, live, and die in darkness. And what animals are born, live, and die in darkness? Moth, maggots, earthworms, and various others. A fool who used to be a glutton here and did bad deeds here after death are reborn in the company of those sentient beings who are born, live, and die in darkness. There are animals who are born, live, and die in water. And what animals are born, live, and die in water? Fish, turtles, crocodiles, and various others. A fool who used to be a glutton here and did bad deeds here, after death is reborn in the company of those sentient beings who are born, live, and die in water. There are animals who are born, live, and die in filth. And what animals are born, live, and die in filth? Those animals that are born, live, and die in a rotten fish, a rotten corpse, rotten porridge, or a sewer. A fool who used to be a glutton here did bad deeds there. Sentient beings. So this is just going through. I'm going to do some ellipsing because there is a lot of repetition. I could tell you many different things about the animal realm, so much though that it's not easy to completely describe the suffering in the animal realm. Now we come to a very famous simile. Mendicants, or at least, so this is one of those things where you will see that if you've read like all of the suttas, like 5,000 pages worth, you'll see the same simile used in slightly different ways. So listen to this simile. Yes, Aposita is tomorrow, and those of you who are on the Discord will do an Aposita session at 5. So, mendicants, suppose a person were to throw a yoke with a single hole, so like a rope with a hole, like a lasso, right? Into the ocean. The east winds waft it west, the west winds waft it east, the north wafted south, the south wafted north. And there is a one-eyed turtle who popped up once every 100 years. So we're setting it up, right? We're setting it up. There's somebody just puts a lasso out adrift in the ocean. And once every 100 years, this turtle pokes its head above the water. Right? What do you think, mendicants? Would that one-eyed turtle still poke its neck through a hole in the yoke? So basically, Buddha's like, what are the chances of that turtle, where every once in 100 years, when it puts its head through, that it goes through the yoke, goes through the lasso? No, sir. Basically, no chances, or only after a very long time, if ever. Now, I bet you somebody who's mathematical, they could, if you gave them like the size of the ocean, they probably could figure out the odds, like, once every billion years or whatever. But that's not me. So I would wonder if somebody could figure that out, though. No, sir, only after a very long time. That one-eyed turtle would poke its neck through the hole in that yoke sooner than a fool who has fallen into the underworld would be reborn as a human being, I say. Why is that? Because there's no principled moral conduct and no doing what is good or skillful. There they just prey on each other, preying through a week. So this is the simile of how rare and precious a human birth is, right? So the Buddha uses, in another place, the Buddha says, suppose a person were to die, right? It is more than likely that they would not be a human again, right? It's so rare to become a human, as rare as that turtle putting its head through the lasso and then becoming a human again is just as rare, right? Because of unskillful behavior. Suppose that fool, after a very long time, will return to the human realm. They'd be reborn in a low-class family, a family of outcasts, hunters, bamboo workers, chariot makers, or waste collectors. Such families are poor with little to eat or drink, where life is tough, and food and shelter are hard to find. And they'd be ugly, unsightly, deformed, chronically ill, one-eyed, crippled, lame, or half paralyzed. They don't get to have food, drink, clothes, and vehicles, garlands, perfumes, and makeup, or bed, house, and lighting. And they do bad things by way of body, speech, and mind. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. Hey, welcome my Kiwi friend, New Zealand friend, Gray. Welcome back to Dhammapalooza. What time we have here? Okay, so I'm going to start ellipsing because this does go through a lot of different things here. So suppose a gambler on the first unlucky throw were to lose his wife and child, all his property, and then get thrown in jail. But such an unlucky throw is trivial compared to the unlucky throw whereby a fool, having done bad things by way of body, speech, or mind, when their body breaks up after death, is born in a place of loss, the underworld. This is the total fulfillment of the fool's level. All right, so we're done with the fools. Now we talk about the wise. There are these three characteristic signs and manifestations of an astute person. What three? The astute person thinks well, speaks well, and acts well. If an astute person didn't think well, speak well, and act well, then how would the astute person know of them? This person is a good person. But since an astute person does think, speak, and act well, they do know of them. This fellow is a good person. An astute person experiences three kinds of pleasure and happiness in this pleasant life. Suppose an astute person is sitting in a council, a hall, a street, etc. People are discussing what is proper and fitting. The astute person is someone who refrains from killing living creatures, committing sexual misconduct, stealing, lying, and drinking alcohol and drinks that cause negligence. Then the astute person thinks this person is discussing what is proper and fitting, and those things are found in me and I am and seen in them. So this is a person, the fool thought that they saw the same things in them, but they didn't, because they didn't see what was true. But the wise person does. Furthermore, when a person sees a king, what kings do to bandits, we're not going to go through the whole thing. They think the kinds of deeds for which the king inflicts such punishments are not found in me. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about getting the punishments of somebody who does unskillful things. Furthermore, an astute person resting on a chair or on the ground, their past deeds settle down upon them. They're good deeds. So you reflect on good deeds. Not a lot of restlessness and worry. But when you reflect on good deeds, lots of calm, peaceful qualities of mind arise. So let me make sure I get to simile. It is like the shadow of a great mountain peak in the evening as it settles down, rests down, and lays down upon the earth. In the same way, when an astute person is resting, their past good deeds settle down upon them. Then the astute person thinks, well, I haven't done bad, violent, and corrupt things, and I have done good, skillful deeds that keep me safe. When I pass away, I will not sorrow and lament, beat my breast, falling into confusion. This is the third kind of pleasure. And so when the body breaks up, they were born in a good place. And if there is anything which might be rightly said is utterly likable, desirable, and agreeable, it is of heaven that this must be said. So much so it's not easy to give a simile. And of course they ask, give us a simile anyway. And so it is possible. Suppose there were a king who possessed 7 treasures and 4 blessings and experienced pleasure and happiness because of them. So the wheel-turning monarch. I'm not going to go through this. Then the... Okay, yeah, this is... All right. Whoa. Okay, I'm skipping. There's no way I'm going to spend time going through all these things. But it goes through all these qualities, all the treasures of the wheel-turning monarch. And so then it goes, sir, a wheel-turning monarch who possessed even a single one of these treasures would experience pleasure and happiness because of that, let alone all 7. Then the Buddha says, what do you think? Which is bigger, the stone in my palm or the Himalayas? So we have the same simile. In the same way, comparing the happiness of heaven to the happiness of the wheel-turning monarch due to these 7 treasures and 4 blessings doesn't even count. Suppose that astute person after a very long time returned to the human realm. They'd be reborn in a well-to-do family of aristocrats, Brahmins, or householders, rich, affluent, and wealthy, with lots of gold and silver, lots of property and assets, and lots of money and grain. And they'd be attractive, good-looking, lovely, of surpassing beauty. They'd get to have food, drink, clothes, and vehicles, garlands, perfumes, and makeup, and a bed, house, and lighting. And they do good things by way of body, speech, and mind. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. Suppose a gambler on the first lucky throw was to win a big pile of money. But such a lucky throw is trivial compared to the lucky throw whereby an astute person, when their body breaks up after death, is reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. This is the total fulfillment of the astute person. This is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the mendicants were happy with what the Buddha said. All right. So what do we have here? It's just about 9 o'clock. So I'll leave it. If anybody has any clarifications or questions regarding what we read, you can type them now while I hydrate. And then once those are done, or if there's nothing, we'll do our guided meditation for the Dhammapalooza. This is why I used to play poker and not dice. Yeah. But interestingly enough, right? The person is not the person who, because of their skillful deeds, ends up in these very good rebirths. It's not because they just got lucky. It's because they did good things, right? It's because of their intention, because of their action that they ended up, not because they just threw a dice and got lucky. All right, so let's do our guided meditation. Okay. Oh, wait, never mind. So Sierra says, so it is very rare to become a human, but the Buddha also said that we have lived many, many human lives, right? We've lived many lives. We've lived every part of samsara. We've been there. We've been in all the hells. We've been in all the heavens. We've been humans. We've been devas, nagas, yakas. We've been Mara. We've been Brahma. We've been just mind-wrought beings. We've been all of these different kind of beings. Hello, Brandon. Good night, Risa. Right, so we have been all of these different kinds of beings. Right? It is thought that the human realm is the best realm because it is the most, for the most part, in the heavenly realms, it's just pure bliss. And if you're just pure blissed out, you're not caring about Dhamma. I mean, there are exceptions. There are devas that practice Dhamma. But if you just have total bliss, pleasure all the time, are you really caring about, eventually I'm going to be reborn again and I better get out of samsara? No, you're just blissed out. Right? And the opposite is true also. If you're in the hells, you're experiencing so much pure suffering all the time that you can't even think of Dhamma. You can't. So the human realm is considered the best realm for listening and practicing Dhamma because it has that kind of good balance, right? So this is why the Buddha, aiming for heaven is okay, but it's not the best, right? The best thing we want to do is become humans again so that we can listen to Dhamma, practice Dhamma, and eventually end our samsaric journey, end our suffering, become awakened. Right? So this is why, but because of this, because of our acting unskillfully in the world, becoming a human is a rare thing. Right? This is an unfortunate thing. This is why when you become a stream enterer, this is why Bhante Ji, my preceptor, he says, becoming a stream enterer is a money-back guarantee. Because once you become a stream enterer, not only are you set within 7 lifetimes more, you're become awakened, but also in those 7 lifetimes or less, no more, the only realms you go into are the human realms or the heavenly realms. That's it. Right? So from those next 7 lifetimes, you'll be in the best positions to continue the rest of your journey to become fully awakened. Right? So this is why we want to, if our goal is to become awakened again, like if I reach the end of my life and I'm not awakened, what my aspiration will be, and of course I don't know what my next life will be. If I don't become a Sotapanna, I could be in my next life, I could be in hell, even if in this life I was really good, right? So I would make an aspiration that I'd be born again as a human in a place I can listen to the Dhamma, right? I have an intuition in my mind that that's actually what got me born here in America. I have this feeling that I was a Buddhist monk in a former life, right? And I made an aspiration to be born again as a human and to become a monk. But that's only my intuition in this regard. But this is why we want human rebirth should not be wasted. This is why we want to do the best that we can with the time that we have, practicing lots of good Dhamma, practicing lots of generosity, practicing moral principles, living by moral principles, practicing meditation to cleanse the mind, because we don't know how much time we have in this human life, and we don't know what our next lifetimes will be or when we'll be humans again. So we want to take the most advantage of this opportunity. This is very important. All right, Brian, have a good night. Yes, this is what happens around this time, especially when we start our guided meditation, we start to drop off. People start to go away. Such is the way. So when we learn, Brandon says, when we learn Dhamma in this lifetime, it carries into the next realm. Yeah, it's part of our karma, right? Listening to the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, that is part of our karma. That continues on, right? That's why lifetime after lifetime, whenever we're able to practice the Dhamma, we keep doing it. And then that builds up, right? So you can not only be born in heaven or hell and not be, you could be a human being and not be able to hear the Dhamma, right? Or you could be born as an alien somewhere in the galaxy, somewhere in the universe, but there hasn't been a Buddha there yet, right? In a long time. So the Dhamma is forgotten, right? So you can be born in a place where the Dhamma is totally forgotten and a time where the Dhamma is forgotten, right? And so you cannot hear the Dhamma. So this is why it's good to have this aspiration to be born in a place and a time where the Dhamma is there. We don't have to necessarily be born in a time where there's a Buddha around, but just that the teaching is there. The teaching is known and that we can learn the teaching. Okay, so let's do our guided meditation. If another question pops up, I'll answer it at the other end. So sit in your chair or your cushion or whatever way is comfortable for you. Sit in the position that you prefer. We'll take a little time in the beginning to scan through the body for two reasons. The first is to bring our awareness from the external, from the outside, to the internal. Bringing our awareness slowly to what's happening in our bodies and then our mind. And the other is to set the body up in a stable and comfortable position that minimizes pain and discomfort as we sit for a period of time. So start by bringing your awareness to whatever feeling and sensation that you can become aware of with your toes and your feet. What is the feeling of the feet pressing against the floor or the cushion? Bring your awareness to those sensations. If while scanning through your body you have trouble bringing your attention or finding a sensation, you can prompt by asking yourself, what do I see? What do I feel? As we're scanning through the body, if you notice any imbalance in your posture or a small discomfort or pain, now is the time to adjust your posture to alleviate that. Something very small that you notice now can turn into much greater pain, discomfort, or imbalance later. So now is the time to make those adjustments. Bring your awareness up through the ankles to the calves and the knees. Up through the thighs. What is the feeling of the thighs pressing against the chair or the cushion? Bring your awareness to your pelvic area, the hips and buttocks. If you're on a cushion, it's good to check that the buttocks is evenly distributed on that cushion, that the pelvis is aligned in such a way that helps with the balance of the upper body. So the upper body is not leaning forward or slouching backwards. The lower body especially the pelvic area, acts as a firm foundation for the upper body. So it's a good thing to take the time to make sure that foundation is stable and comfortable. Because if it isn't, that will ripple and have effects on the upper body as well. And when you're done setting up the lower body in a stable and comfortable position, move your awareness up through the abdomen into the chest, checking again to see if you're leaning or slouching. If your lower body is set up in a good way, you can just allow the spine to be in its natural curvature, its neutral position, resting comfortably, not extended or stretched out. Bring your awareness to your shoulders. Make sure that they're hanging loosely, not scrunched up and tight. Travel down through your elbows and your hands, making sure that the elbows and hands are placed in a comfortable way and in a way that supports the balance of your posture. The elbows and the hands are, just like the pelvis, another major part that can have an impact on the balance of your posture. And lastly, bring your awareness to your head. Just as the upper body rests on the foundation of the lower, so too does the head rest on the foundation of the upper body. It will go where the spine goes. So check to see that the head is resting comfortably on a neutral spine. Balanced and not slouching one way or the other, with the chin parallel to the floor. This process of going through the body during a guided meditation can take some time. But if you do this before you're meditating and you practice it, eventually It won't take that much time at all. Just a few minutes. And you'll notice the difference in your sitting, both the length and the comfort. So pay attention to your posture. And when you've set your body up in a comfortable and stable position, let the body go and take 3 deep breaths. And then let the breath go. From here on in, we do not wish to manipulate or control the breath in any way. This body has been breathing from the moment you were born and will continue to do so until the second you die. Your job is to simply abide with the breath, to investigate it, observe it. Watch as this body breathes in. Watch as this body breathes out. Friends, we come to this meditation with many responsibilities, worries, and burdens, family and friends, work and school, many things that will seek to come to our minds as we practice. But for now, as we practice, let's practice letting go, laying down these burdens. There'll be plenty of time to pick them back up when we're done with the practice. But for now, let them be. Just as the mighty Atlas holds the world on his shoulders, so do we all hold our world on our shoulders. A heavy burden. Put that burden down. Lay your world down and follow the breath. As you follow the breath, your mind will get bored or decide to think about the past or the future. Your mind will become distracted. That's normal. It's simply the mind showing you how it works, showing you its craving. You did not do anything wrong or fail. This is the practice. So whenever you get distracted, first acknowledge that you have been distracted. As your mindfulness returns and you see that you're not on the breath anymore, recognize that. Then practice letting go, and then return to the breath. By practicing letting go, we mean that we do not wish to be agitated and try to push the distraction away, nor do we want to become attached to it. Think about it more and more. Indulge in it. We simply want to let the distraction be. Let it go. Give it no focus or energy. And return to the breath. However many times you get distracted, it's okay. Simply acknowledge, let go, and return over and over again. Be with the breath. The breath is our home. It's always there waiting for us. We can always return to the breath. As you're following your breath, as you're letting go and returning from distractions, you might start to notice that you're being distracted less, staying with the breath more, and your mind is starting to become more calm and tranquil. Every once in a while, check in with the state of your mind. As your mind becomes more calm and tranquil, you might begin to start to see further, more subtle characteristics of the breath. Start to see how the breath is changing. You may notice that sometimes the breath is long and deep. Sometimes the breath is short and shallow. Investigate these changes. See if you can observe further characteristics of the breath. More and more subtle, deep, and refined characteristics. As your mind gets more calm, more focused on the breath, you might start to see even more subtle and refined characteristics of the breath. You might begin to see the full cycle of the breath. The body breathing in, the pause when the lungs are full of air, the body breathing out, the pause when the lungs are empty of air. Try to stay with and investigate as deeply as you can the full cycle of the breath. What does it feel like when the lungs are full of air? What does it feel like when the lungs are empty of air? Investigate the full cycle of the breath. Slowly begin to come out of the meditation, out of the internal, back to the live stream, the room around you, the external. Slowly start to open your eyes. Reflect on the state of your mind. How was the state of your mind before starting the meditation? What about now? Is your mind calm and peaceful? Or is it a raging torrent? Maybe it's worse now than it was before the meditation. All are possible. So friends, in these last 25 minutes of Dhammapalooza, if you have any comments, questions, anything you'd like to discuss, now's the time to bring them up. And if nothing happens, then we will continue with our tradition of ending the Dhammapalooza with lots of nice verses. So we're just reading through, nothing heavy, nothing big, just reading some verses of Dhamma. Currently reading through the first chapter, the first section of the Samyutta Nikaya, which is all verses. And then once we're done with that, we're going to read through the Dhammapada. Just a few verses here and there. I see silence in the chat. So let's do some reading. Hello, Amy. Welcome. We are in Samyutta Nikaya, number 1, number 33. And we're continuing on with the Devas coming to the Buddha, saying various verses. And actually, I think we're on number 34. I think we ended up with 33. So number 34. There are no. John says, quieter and softer afterwards this time. Thanks, Bante. I didn't do anything. Simply causes and conditions allowed your mind to be quiet, to calm down. Perhaps my voice in my guided meditation was one of those causes and conditions. But we look deeper, right? The causes and conditions stem back even to this morning, maybe even yesterday or the day before, right? Lots of causes and conditions go into determining how your meditation is going to be, including your mindset and your wishes, your craving. So there are no. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi and Jeta's Grove and Nathapindika's Park. Then when the night had advanced, a number of devatas belonging to the Satulapa host of the stunning beauty illuminating the entire Jeta's Grove approached the Blessed One. Having approached, they paid homage to the Blessed One and stood to one side. Then one devata, standing to one side, recited this verse in the presence of the Blessed One. There are among humans no permanent sensual pleasures. Here, there are just desirable things. When a person is bound to these, heedless in their midst, from death's realm, he does not reach the state of no more coming back. Another devata says, misery is born of desire. Suffering is born of desire. By the removal of desire, misery is removed. By the removal of misery, suffering is removed. Now the Buddha responds. This is an interesting one because in the last 7 or 8 that we've read, the devatas are saying all kinds of huge verses, and the Buddha gives maybe one paragraph, maybe 4 lines. But in this time, the devas give a little bit and the Buddha gives much. So the Buddha says, they are not sense pleasures, the world's pretty things. Man's sensuality is the intention of lust. The pretty things remain as they are in the world, but the wise remove desire for them. So this is important to understand, right? So the Buddha is saying here that it is not the things in and of themselves that are a problem. It's our desire, right? It's our intention for lust. The pretty things remain just as they are in the world, right? One should discard anger, cast off conceit, transcend all the fetters. No sufferings torment one who has nothing, who has laid down the burdens, right? Who has given up all. No sufferings torment one who has nothing, who does not adhere to name and form. He abandoned reckoning, did not assume conceit. He cut off craving here for name and form. Though devas and humans search for him here and beyond, in the heavens and all the abodes, they do not find the one whose knots are cut, the one untroubled, free from longing. If devas and humans are not seen, the one thus liberated here or beyond, said the Venerable Mogaharaja, are they to be praised who venerate them, the best of men, faring for the good of humans? Those bhikkhus too become worthy of praise, who venerate him, the ones thus liberated. But having known the Dhamma and abandoned doubt, those bhikkhus become even surmounters of tides. Fault finders. Okay, Gray. I see your question here. Let's do this one last sutta, and then I can answer that. Fault finders. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi, Ajeta's Grove, Anathapindika's Park. Then, when the night had advanced, a number of fault-finding devatas of stunning beauty, illuminating the entire Ajeta's Grove, approached the Blessed One and stood in the air. Then the devata standing in the air recited this verse in the presence of the Blessed One. If one shows oneself in one way, while actually being otherwise, what one enjoys is obtained by theft, like the gains of a cheating gambler. I.e., if you don't walk the walk, if you talk the talk and you don't walk the walk, then you're obtained by theft, like a cheating gambler. Another devata, one should speak as one would act. Don't speak as one wouldn't act. The wise clearly discern the person who does not practice what he preaches. There you go. Now the Buddha responds, not by mere speech nor solely by listening can one advance on this firm path of practice, by which the wise ones, the meditators, are released from the bondage of Mara. Truly the wise do not pretend, for they have understood the way of the world. By final knowledge the wise are quenched. They have crossed over attachment to the world. Then those devatas, having alighted on the earth, prostrated themselves with their heads at the Blessed One's feet, and said to the Blessed One, a transgression overcame us, Venerable Sir, being so foolish, so stupid, so unskilled, that we imagined we could assail the Blessed One. Let the Blessed One pardon us our transgressions, seen as such for the sake of restraint in the future. So, normally when the devas come, they come down and they bow to the Buddha. But these devas, at first, they just stood in the air, like above the Buddha, mightily proclaiming their things. But then the Buddha responded, and they were so taken and impacted by what the Buddha said that they say, oh, we were stupid. And they came down and they, bowed, they paid respects, and they admitted their transgression. Then the Buddha displayed a smile. Those devatas, finding fault to an ever greater extent, then rose up in the air. One devata recited this verse. They got angry again. One Devata recited this verse in the presence of the Buddha. If one does not grant pardon to those who confess transgressions, angry at heart, intent on hate, one strongly harbors enmity. So they're saying, we admitted our transgression, but you did not forgive us. You did not accept this. So you must be angry. You must not be as wise as we thought. And so the Blessed One says, if there was no transgression, if here there was no going astray, and if enmities were appeased, then one would be faultless here. The Devata. For whom are there no transgressions? For whom is there no going astray? Who has not fallen into confusion? Who is the wise one, ever mindful? The Blessed One says, the Tathagata, the Enlightened One, full of compassion for all beings. For him there are no transgressions. For him there's no going astray. He has not fallen into confusion. He is the wise one, ever mindful. If one does not grant pardon to those who confess transgression, angry at heart, intent on hate, one strongly harbors enmity. In that enmity I do not delight. Thus I pardon your transgressions. All right, Gray. So can you offer a meditative approach to vulnerability? Well, I would say one of the things that we come to understand as Buddhist practitioners, as meditators, we realize that there is no safety in samsara. There's no security, right? You are, no matter how much you try not to be, you're vulnerable, right? You are stuck in samsara, so you're vulnerable. The only refuge, the secure refuge, is to become awakened. That's the only way that you are no longer vulnerable. You are secure. That's what the Buddha says when somebody is awakened. They're secure in their freedom, right? Other than that, we are always vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? Old age, sickness, and death. Loss, right? This is the nature of being in samsara. The nature of being born is that we're subject to old age, sickness, and death. We're subject to losing the things that we love, people, places, experiences, etc. We're subject to these things, all right? Because we're not awakened, because we are born again, we are subject to these things. Okay? So this is a very important contemplation and a very important understanding of the nature of reality. Right? As we contemplate that all things are impermanent, we contemplate that not only are we subject to old age, sickness, and death, but all beings are subject to old age, sickness, and death. There's no difference there. There's no surprise. There's no other way. Right? This is the nature. If you're born, you're subject to these things. When you're no longer born again, you're not subject to these things. You're free of these things, right? So vulnerability is not something that you have to do or not have to do. It's always there. You are always vulnerable. No matter how much you try to not be vulnerable, you're there, right? And so this can help us when we reflect on this in this way. It can help us to realize that, well, guess what? Why am I doing this? I'm just causing myself suffering, trying to change the world into something that it's not, trying to make myself safe and secure and invulnerable, right? When that is impossible, right? So you understand what is right. You understand, okay, and then you understand what to do. Well, I'm not going to waste my time doing these things. I'm a vulnerable being. I'm a human being, a vulnerable being in this existence. I'm subject to all of these things. So why don't I practice well? Why don't I develop my meditation, develop my practice? What else is there to do? I am not free. There is no refuge in anything in existence from these things. There's no way really for me to make myself invulnerable. Right? We are vulnerable. We're born into this world vulnerable. Right? So there's no escaping that. So then the question becomes, how do you act? That's the important question. Knowing that you're vulnerable, knowing that all beings are vulnerable, how do you act? That's the important question. So if you have these reflections, you reflect on these things, then that can lead you towards acting skillfully, acting wisely, understanding that these are the nature of this is the deal. When you were born, you signed on the dotted line to be born, right? And because you're born, you have all these stipulations, right? You are a vulnerable being. Now we have over many thousands of years, right? We've created this thing called civilization, society, that gives us the illusion that we're not vulnerable to certain things. Like most of us not have to go hunt for our food and worry about starvation and worry about marauding bands of people that can just kill us and take all our things, right? So we think that we've developed a level of security, a level of invulnerability. And in a gross level, then that's probably accurate. But there comes a time when that veneer of civilization, of security, disappears. And then the vulnerability, it becomes very present, very clear once again. And you realize, oh, yeah, I'm a vulnerable being. I'm subject to all these things. How do I act? That's the Buddha's message. The 5 subjects of contemplation that the Buddha gives, that he says that whether you're a woman or a man, lay or ordained, you should reflect on these things. I'm subject to old age, subject to sickness, subject to death. I'm not exempt from these things. I'll be separated from everything and everyone I love, and I'm the owner of my actions. So the Buddha is saying, knowing that this is truth, this is reality, how do you act? That's the question you ask yourself. Knowing this truth, how do I act? You reflect on that. Reflect on the teachings of wise beings, wise people of the past. And then you might know what is the best thing to do. How is the best way to act? Burnson says, is there safety in Dhamma even if we don't awaken in this lifetime? The safety in the Dhamma, if you're going for refuge, like when we go for refuge for the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, what we're going for refuge is ironically the fact that there's no refuge, right? The only thing that we do, what the teachings allow us to do, is suffer less over the realities, right? We suffer less. The more we practice, the more we develop our insight and our wisdom, we suffer less. Until one day we've let it all go, we've laid down our burdens, and we no longer suffer anymore. Right? That's all there is. The teaching only gives us so much consolation, right? We practice, we develop our insight, we understand, we suffer less, right? The teachings in and of themselves, the Dhamma, there's no safety in that, right? You can be a faithful Dhamma practitioner your whole life, but then next life you go to hell because of past karma, right? is that the Dhamma didn't save you from that. That is part of your karma. That is part of the nature of reality, the nature of samsara, that you don't know where you're going to go next. Right? Until you become a sotapanna, then you're secure. But other than that, you don't know. Right? So all you can do is take these teachings on, hold them dearly, live by them, practice them, and slowly, slowly, gradually lessen your suffering. And yes, that is actually a very good question. Very good question. Okay, friends. Only a couple minutes left, so I think we can end here. We'll do the sharing of merits. So dukkha patta chane dukkha, bhaya patta chane bhaya, soka patta chane soka, hontu sabbe pipaniyo, ettavata cha mehi sampadang punya sampadang, sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya, akasatta chabumatta deva naga mahiddika, punyang tang anumoditva charanga kantu sasanang. English. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired, for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, friends, so we've come to the end of another Dhammapalooza. So if you like the Dhammapalooza, feel free to join us again next week, same time. I also do 8 o'clock in the mornings, Monday through Saturday. Here, I'm doing live stream. We do like a half-hour session of monastery experience in the morning. So I do precepts for those who want to take the precepts. We do a little chanting, and then I give a little Dhamma talk. Right? This is called our monastery experience every morning, live streaming on this channel at 8 a.m. Eastern, USA. And yeah, so thank you for, I see a bunch of likes. I appreciate that. I help the channel grow and be more, become more aware for Dhamma on the internet, and do the same for any other monastics, any other Dhamma channels that you follow. Please do these things so that they can be more made more aware on YouTube. It's very important. That's a good thing. So that the more Dhamma on YouTube, the more Dhamma on all of these online communities, the better. So friends, and also, if you are a Buddhist practitioner, somewhat not necessarily brand new, but if you are a Theravada practitioner who kind of likes to learn the suttas and uses the suttas as their basic framework, you might want to join our online community, the Discord Sangha, Magga Seka, Student of the Path community. Many of the people on here are from that, right? And we do all kinds of activities, meditate together, sutta readings, etc. So you can join us there if you'd like. You can send an email to maggaseka@gmail.com. Magga means path. Seka means trainee or student. So Magga Seka is the Pali for student of the path, which is the name of this channel. Okay, friends. Until next time, Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy, practice well, and be well.